podcast where we talk to smart people, but not necessarily done by smart people?
That is an awesome question.
This one goes down probably on one of my top 5.
Hey, I like nutrition. I like to eat food.
This is the coolest thing ever. We're going to do this forever.
I wish I paid more attention in that class.
You know, I'm going to be honest, I don't understand that. As a man, I don't get it.
Welcome to smartpeoplepodcast.com.
Hello and welcome to Smart People Podcast, conversations that satisfy your curious mind. I don't even want to do an intro. I just want you to get into this interview. One of my favorites. It really was. And man, not only did I need it, but they come sometimes unexpected. We're talking to Jeff Garson. Jeff is a lawyer turned psychotherapist. And right there in and of itself, you've got a conversation because, you know, I don't want to pick on lawyers, but let's be honest. He's a social activist, graduate of Johns Hopkins University, the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and the Bryn Mawr College School of Social Work and Social Research. And what we're actually talking about is he is the co-founder and chair of the Decency Foundation. His mission is to bring decency's 7 values to every area of living, with a special emphasis on business. Look, that can sound weird. That's not the best pitch for this. Let's talk about the book. Book is Radical Decency, a values-based approach to a better life and world. Trust me, listen to this interview. Like, how many times do I really push up front? We get into some pretty deep stuff, but I think it's a conversation you'll enjoy. Let us know what you think. smartpeoplepodcast@gmail.com. If you like these conversations, if you want us to keep bringing them to you, you can always support us. You get ad-free episodes, connect with our guests, patreon.com/smartpeoplepodcast. Let's get into it. We're talking to Jeff Garson about his new book, Radical Decency, a values-based approach to a better life and world. Enjoy. So, you know, Jeff, before we hit the record button here, I was talking about what hooked me about your topic, your book, what you do. And it was this idea of a values-based approach. When you said, you know what, I'm going to put my stake in the ground that we need as a society, as a whole, as a globe, to start taking a values-based approach. What do you mean by that?
So, well, it gets back to diagnosis, really. I do think that we live in a world that's just littered with injustice and indecencies, and it's not good. And having experimented for many years with various approaches, I concluded that what we're facing actually is a values-based approach. A values-based problem. Mm-hmm. And I characterize the predominant values as compete and win, dominate, and control. And I'm careful to say that these are perfectly good values. I mean, they definitely have their place, and I approve of them, but they're way out of control. Mm-hmm. They're everywhere. And they're in our marriages, they're in the ways that we feel about ourselves and so on. So if we have a values-based problem, it seems to me that the core initiative to turn things around has to be values-based. So what I advocate for is to reorient yourself to a set of values that I call decency, and I break down into respect, understanding, empathy, acceptance, appreciation, fairness, and justice. And you can see it diverges dramatically from compete and win, dominate, and control. The other point I make is that we are intensely creatures of habit, and we're very influenced by the environments we live in. So if we're going to pull this off, both in our personal lives and in the way we're in the world, we're going to have to practice those values at all times and without exception, which is the radical part of my philosophy. So it's decency radically practiced or radical decency.
Couple of things I tell you, Jeff, and this is not only is this complete authenticity and honesty, but the listeners haven't heard me say this much. So people behind the scenes know this. After 10, 11 years of doing this, I feel like I've built this superpower where pretty early on in an interview or a discussion, I can kind of decipher where's this going, where's the value, how well articulated is this going to be, how interesting. And I'm telling you, this is going to be awesome. And the way I know this is I already have 5 things, as you were saying. I was like, I could talk about each of these for an hour. For what it's worth, I think
Well,
you're spot on.
I can't be more excited about that because, the whole concept of radical decency is always going to be a work in progress. It's just too complicated. So when people try to pick it apart and ask good questions, that's the most fun.
That's how we figure it out. So let's start with this kind of general assumption, which is the world is undecent. I don't think that's a hard statement to make, but I do think it's probably one we could easily push back on and try to disprove. I'm thinking along these lines. I can validate it's undecent. I can look at war, the way we treat our poor and wealth gaps. I can look at the way we're treating the world and the environment. I can look at climate change. I mean, there's a million places. But I could also say we're still striving. It's aspirational. You'd rather live today than 100 years ago, 100 than 200. So tell us about this foundational thing, which is it is an undecent place.
Wow. There's so many ways of approaching that issue. Look, so many things have changed over the last 400 years, 2,000 years. And yeah, a lot of things are better. Fewer people are starving. That's a good thing. But I do think fundamentally, I'm a psychotherapist, a lawyer turned psychotherapist. In my psychotherapy practice, I'm so aware of the fact that we're always dealing with two parts of the brain. The more fundamental part of the brain, which I think is affiliative and loving, we need each other, we care about each other, and our fight or flight brain, which is about survival. And survival is, it's no joke. So our fight or flight brain is about annihilating danger. And that danger can be physical or it can be psychological. And I think what's happened increasingly in our culture is that we're spending more and more time in our fight or flight brain. And when you're in your fight or flight brain, you're not doing good things to the people that you perceive as dangerous, nor to yourself, because you have to be completely tough-minded on yourself when you feel like you're at risk. And that's indecent. And I do think it's a theme behind so many things that you pointed out are going on in the world that are indecent.
Again, I like that approach for this fact. You're not trying to say the world in its entirety is this awful place. What I'm hearing is also a sentence that I wrote down. I very rarely write down entire sentences. It's just chicken scratch here. But people listen to this, right? In our present world, we are groomed to push for more, to be the best, to be a success, to win. Then, when this strategy for living falls short, we blame ourselves. Like, that statement resonates, especially for those probably listening who want to achieve, who want to excel, who want to succeed, who want to make something of themselves and those around them. And it hurts a little bit. And I think that is when we talk about undecent to ourselves, and then, like you said, the environment that might push us to feel this way.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the keys to this is in decency to self, which I think is as sorely missing in our culture as decency to others in the world. It is tragic. And I always, I've grown to be very focused on the mantra that you hear all the time, which is you can do anything if you try hard enough. And it sounds great, right? And when we see it on ads, where it's, wow, yes, he overcame the odds and won an Olympic gold medal. But there's a second part to that sentence, which is you can do anything if you try hard enough. So if you don't succeed, you only have yourself to blame. And boy, does that operate in the world. And it is so sad. I see it in my therapy practice all the time. And the second best football team in the universe, what do they do all winter long? They walk around feeling like terrible people, failures, because they lost the Super Bowl. Really?
I have long seen a benefit to this mindset of my results are mine and mine alone. I have authority over what happens to me. So many people know this, previous life. I taught for Franklin Covey and 7 Habits. And a big thing is the stimulus determines your response, but you get to choose how you respond to that. I have authenticity over myself. And I believe in that, but put in the context you're saying, which is if everything is the result of you, then all the naturally perhaps unpleasant things that happen, you will also attribute to yourself.
That's right. That's true. So I completely agree with that. And, I believe this deeply. Compete and win, dominate and control is a great thing. It sharpens your wits. It challenges you to do better. But there has to be more than that. It has to rest within, I think, a broader sense of who you are and what your values are, where you can say to yourself, it was great to give it my best shot, and this is how it turned out. And you know what? I can learn from that. There's a wonderful thing in the Jewish tradition where they say, when you go to a court, this is in the Talmud, and you lose, they say you should thank the judge because he's helped you understand a better course of action in the future. And I think that gets at what I'm talking about. It's not about not competing. It's about competing and then and valuing it for what it does for you. It helps you achieve, and then putting it in a broader context.
What do you say to those that go, look, these ideas of competition, winning, beating others, perhaps the undecent side, is deeply rooted in survival, which is at the core of who we are. We can't stray from it. It's as part of our DNA as sleeping and breathing and mating, things like that.
My answer is you're right. Absolutely. And it has a place, but it's not everything. One powerful moment I had years ago now, I was in Africa, and we came up on a pride of lions, and it was about 3 p.m, and they were absolutely so relaxed and just lying on each other, and you could see the connection, the between all of them. And then the sun went down, and just like that, they were up, and they were in line, and they were hunting. But you see, I think they had a better balance. They were able to be affiliative and loving, and then when they needed to, click into their fight or flight survival stuff, they did, and then they click back. I don't think we do that anymore. We wake up in the morning and we hit the button and we start reading our emails, and we're automatically on.
It's true. And not only are we on, but we are conditioned, and we're speaking in broad generalities, I realize that, but not everybody, but the vast majority are conditioned to believe exactly what you're saying, right? The goal of my day is in somewhat to gain, to increase, to improve. And look, I'm saying a lot of this because this is something a battle I've kind of fought internally for, 20 years, I fully have tried to do a lot of work here for the fact that it leads to unhealthy places. For me, it was a lot of anxiety and things like that. So I get it, right? And so are you advocating that first we start inside, or do we start with the environment we're in, therefore changing the systems and things like that?
Yeah, I think it has to be all of the above, and it's something I feel very strongly about. People, really great people who are friends and who I admire will say, well, let's start with the children, or let's start with this, or let's start with that. I don't think we can. Starting with the children, if we're teaching them bad values, we're not starting with the children. So this mantra, decency to self, others, and the world, I take very seriously. The other way to look at it is, so you start internally, which is the place where most people start. Well, then I go out in the world, and I'm do what I have to. I was a lawyer for 25 years. I do what I have to do, right? In this, it was a decent law firm. It's a big law firm. Quote, good guys. Well, the problem is that everything in that larger world invades the smaller islands of decency I'm trying to create. I just don't think it works. That's why I say decency to self, others, and the world. But if you bring it to every place, then each place in your life reinforces decency in the other places. So you kind of reverse the equation.
I do want to talk about lawyer turned psychotherapist. That's just, I could spend an hour on that. But I want to talk about the psychotherapist part for a second, because when I think of this idea, okay, I'm going to really take this approach to change those values to more of the decency and all of the components you mentioned, as opposed to strive, succeed, and win. And I think about it even as simply as in my marriage. There is a part, now I'm not saying it's the primary part, and I think I'm a pretty good partner, but there is a part that the fight or flight or the fear piece that pops up and says, if you do this, if you spend more time, what are the characteristics you were talking about of decency?
You mean the 7 values?
Yeah, the values.
Respect, understanding, empathy, acceptance, appreciation, fairness, and justice.
Okay. So if I spend the time there, then do I lose I don't want to call it allure, but the masculinity? Do I lose the aspect that is maybe male, or just maybe attractive, or maybe ingrained in us? There's a fear of moving away from the lion, right? I don't know. How do you feel about that? I'm sure you hear things like that.
No, that's a great question that I haven't heard a lot of.
Okay.
And I was thinking about myself, because I do, I was a litigator,
Right.
And
yes.
so,
thank you. Yeah.
So I have that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like when I took this journey, I had to worry about seeming masculine in the world. So I can't say that I've reflected on that a great deal. I do think that the old-fashioned view of masculinity is kind of a false god. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that just rings hollow to me. Toughest guy in the room. Yeah. And I think what I think of as true masculinity, really, I don't think is at odds with this philosophy.
Yeah.
Because it's tough-minded. The minute you introduce decency to self into the equation, which I absolutely insist on, this is not a Pollyanna thing. It's not like be nice to everybody.
Right.
Right? And that's key. And maybe that's the best answer to your question. It's very assertive.
I think that's the quick unlock for me there, which is, look, decency doesn't mean passive or weak. It actually could mean the exact opposite, right? Because you are trying to be, constantly a certain way. I think where it kind of triggered for me, if we remove it from, say, a relationship, but professional world, as you talk about being a lawyer, I can remember multiple times. Maybe I'm giving a presentation, or I'm trying to influence, and feedback being like, hey, be more blank. It's very, for me at least, it's not like be less often. It's be more assertive, be more strong, be more impactful, be more sure of yourself, be more. And like that just gets drilled in to people as they climb, especially the corporate ladder as well, and can be misinterpreted as, one, don't be as caring or outwardly focused, and two, be stronger. Don't be weak. And I think that is also what is getting caught up for me a little bit.
Yeah, maybe one way of looking at this is that we do want to make our mark in the world. And if you go with the kind of compete, win, dominate, and control framework that is what we're offered, I mean, what the heck? We're offered it from forever. Our kids are worried about grades. Right. That's compete and win. So there's kind of a I don't want to use a bad word, but a more, I'm going to call it debased version of success, which is very easy to see. But I think if I step back and think about the people I admire the most, they do a much less obvious pathway to success, and become transcendent because they combine decency with strength and with clarity and with willingness to take on tough challenges and accept consequences.
And I think that is a key component, right? Is think about those that you admire less than, perhaps all the thoughts swirling in your head. A friend of mine recently, we were talking about thinking in general. And I said, yeah, why is it so hard to process this in my own brain? And he was like, Well, that's because we live in our own brains 100% of the time. I only get a peek into yours,
Yeah, right.
a tenth of a percent. And so the reason I say that is we can get really jumbled a whole lifetime of perhaps different experiences, influences, etc. But you're right. When I look at who do I want to surround myself, who do I value, who do I want to emulate, decency is something that would come straight to the top.
Man, that's a great point. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I never quite thought of it that way. And I want to bring it back to, you mentioned Franklin Covey.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know his work, but I know his father's work.
Yes.
And it changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
And as I think about people that I admire, he is one person who has consistently stayed at the top of the list. And I find myself quoting him a lot.
Yep.
So point well taken.
Well, and you're right, actually. I mean, if we went down that path and having worked there and understanding pretty in depth who he was and what he was about, I think it does embody a lot of this, because he was not weak. In fact, he was very strong, but usually, from what I have observed, with the best intentions. And that's kind of a little bit what I'm picking up here. So I want to, and people are like, okay, Chris, I get it. I want to know how to do it. We're going to get into that, but there's just so much depth here. I want to talk about how our environment impacts our habits and how habits play a role in this.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Again, where to begin?
Yeah.
So let's think about couples, okay? Which you mentioned, and that is my great love as a psychotherapist, working with couples, and it's tragic, actually, because couples come in, and where most of them start is, we're in trouble. Let me tell you what she's doing. And then, of course, she's saying, we're in trouble. Let me tell you what he's doing. Well, that's fight or flight, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Change, because we got to get better. You got to change. And to me, that's pure fight or flight, right? I'm anxious. I've been tripped into fight or flight, which is very fast and very strong. And you're the enemy. I need to neutralize you. Okay? And then think how hard it is to make the shift. The shift being, I hear your anxiety, and I'm not going to take it as an attack on me, but an expression of your anxiety. And instead of telling you about my anxiety, I'm going to make choices that ease your anxiety. Well, I understand why you're so upset, because I came in and I just ignored the kids and sat down and watched television. It makes sense that it upset you. Why wouldn't it? And what's so beautiful about it, I'm drifting, I think, a bit from your question, is your wife has a moment of healing, right? You have a moment of growth, because you've managed your instinct to counterattack, and you've been the person that you want to be. Patient, loving, understanding. Now, getting back to your point, this isn't milquetoast stuff.
Right.
You might say, I know you're upset that I didn't take care of the kids when I came in, but I really had to get to this phone call. It was not an option. I'm sorry you're upset. And I really do feel badly about that, but I needed to take care of myself too.
Are you saying that the environment we're in this scenario would be kind of a relationship, and there's a lot of things we have to get done, we're busy, we've got kids, all that. So the habits we fall into are those of perhaps blaming others, not paying attention, always being on the defensive, and therefore can lead to a lack of focus on values?
Yeah, I think so. Sure. And another version of that, which I think we talked about earlier, is the drive to succeed can lead to, losing focus on values also. I want this contract, and I'm just going to do what I have to do to get it. It's just too valuable to me.
How much of our perhaps undecent, behaviors are caused by the need or want to be accepted or promoted or, loved by others? Because I'm thinking about this idea of success, right? Everybody faces this. I just talked to former CEO of StubHub, and I was talking, she's got a family. I said, how hard is it to find balance? Especially striving professional, right? So you've got your family or your hobbies. They're at odds to some extent with the time you dedicate to work, but you want your boss or your company to, there's so many competing demands, trying to please others, leading to lack of authenticity, perhaps a less of our decent values-based approach.
Well, see, one of the challenges of this approach, if you really try to be decent at all times in every context, in every moment, is that it does not fit that well with traditional notions of success. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't be a success, but the minute you throw yourself into a large corporation or a large law firm, the odds are about 99% that if you're going to succeed, you're going to have to succeed on their terms, and succeeding on those terms is going to mean that you're going to have to compromise your values. So it's a tough world out there. And the solution that I've come to in my life is that I started and run the businesses that I've been involved in for the last 20 years. And so that's allowed me the space, you see, to structure my businesses in a way that doesn't put me in exactly the situation that I was in for 25 years when I was a lawyer.
You know why I love this? I've thought about this for a while. So I started in finance, and for a very similar reason, said I want to run my own company. And then from there, I helped build a nonprofit. I started a coaching business. I wanted to, it was like, I can't abide by their versions of success because it makes me have to be a person that I don't want to be. And I don't mean a mean or a bad person. I just mean I couldn't be as, I don't know. I like people, as kind, as caring. I just couldn't do it, at least to your point, in the context that I want. And I've seen it so much in just the past 10, 12 years. Think about this idea of the gig economy, the creator economy, right? All the people trying to, I'm not sure if you've heard of like FIRE. It's financial independence, retire early, is this thing. And just all these things, people are just trying as hard as they can to accomplish their financial goals and needs and then get out. Like it's just, or do it on their own terms only at the sacrifice of things like healthcare and stability. And I think so often we just go, that's how it works. Look at capitalism. It is, but again, this goes back to your point. It is a structure, an environment designed to almost progress this idea of being undecent.
It's, and I do think, I stake my whole approach to living on the fact that fundamentally we are good people, we're affiliative people, that the thing that makes this senseless thing we call our lives, worth living is, the love that we offer and the love that we get back. And I do think that's our basic nature, but we can't, we're twisted in a different direction. And it's really tough. This notion of make your money and then retire and do good in the world, I have some very real skepticism about that. I think you have to, I don't think growing into a better set of values is at all easy. I think it takes a lot of time and a lot of thought and a lot of, good choices at, important choice points in your life. So I'm not saying it can't be done. But I think the bulk of the people who make a fortune and then say, I'm going to save the world, wind up with a save the world strategy that looks a lot like, well, let's do compete and win, but turn it into more food for people in Africa, which is good. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, but it's not going to change the world.
It's not. And you know why? So I'm thinking back to a guest we interviewed literally probably 8 years ago. And I like the guy, and I think what he's doing is good, but he very clearly said, from early on, I said, I'm going to go work on Wall Street. I'm going to make a ton of money. I'm going to retire. I'm going to take that money to do good in the world. And he did exactly that. He built some amazing nonprofits. So it's not a negative against him, but here's what it doesn't do. It doesn't challenge the values of making money or Wall Street in the first place.
Exactly. That's so important.
Yeah, it's just because think about it. Now you're essentially saying to the 18-year-old listening to that interview, okay, if I want to do well, I first then have to dedicate the 6, 8, 10, 15 years of schooling to finance. Then I got to go. Then I got to be in that environment, which I don't care what you say. If you're in it, you understand what I'm talking about. Just to get to this place where most of us want to get to in the first place. I agree with you. I think, most people want to be exactly what you're saying, affiliative, helpful. It's where we get probably our most enjoyment. It's been proven in a lot of, very rigorous studies as well. So to your point, by saying this is the way it has to be done, just further continues this path of we have to go through being undecent, perhaps to get to the end. And I keep using this term undecent. I don't want it to cause people to step back. I think I don't know. That's very complicated. It's just this idea of maybe not being the best we can be, want to be, feel we should be.
I was, I'm not going to be able to pick it up, but I read a book by a man with an almost impronounceable Indian name about people. I call it the book about the best of the worst, about people who made lots and lots of money and then went out in the world and tried to save the world. And the limitations on their initiatives and the confusions about their initiatives. And it was such an important point. It was like, it's that whole compete and win structure that we have to dismantle. And I would feel a lot better if people like Gates and so on said, yeah, I want to do all these great initiatives, but I also want to really look at how I made my money. And I think we don't hold me up as an example, but I know a lot about how we might dismantle this very indecent structure that's allowed me to live the life I've lived.
Man, I thinking about it from an entire, global, paradigm shift from the beginning. I mean, it's too massive to wrap my brain around, but I see then what you're getting at, right? I see kind of the core of your belief system there, which is like, you would have to, and you got to start somewhere, but reevaluate all aspects. Like you're talking about schooling. Like, is the goal to grade on a bell curve, be at the top so that you can go to the top university, and although go into massive amounts of debt, now you have to graduate with a high-paying job. Those high-paying jobs tend to serve capitalistic, and this sounds terrible. I don't mean it like that. It's just how I've experienced it to be designed. And then truthfully breaking out and saying, I'm going to start my own nonprofit and all this, like in my late 20s was making less money doing twice the amount of work just to try to do good in the world, because that's what I wanted to accomplish. And it was almost untenable.
But I'll tell you, I think your journey and mine at different stages of life are very similar, because I'm about 99.9% certain that you are so much happier.
Oh my
since
God.
you made
I can't
this
even.
shift.
Yeah.
And the same with me. It won't surprise you to know that I'm making less money as a psychotherapist than I did as a lawyer.
Sure. Yeah.
But in terms of, I wake up every day and I thank God I have the life I have.
Yeah.
And that's real. Mm-hmm. And it can be done. You said where to start. I have an answer to that question.
Good, let's go there, because we're going to get into the action now. Okay, we've got there. How do we do it? Let's get in there. So where do we start? Okay. And then we'll get into the individual.
Okay, so here's what I've come to over the course of experimenting in about 15 years, which is we got to do it every place, but the pivot point in the culture is business, right? Business runs the world. They fund everything else.
You're right.
Right? Okay. So that's the place to start, with business. And I think there's a good case to be made for bringing radical decency to business. And there are increasing numbers of people who are saying this, but they're saying it, unfortunately, in my view, in a soft way. They're saying, being a good citizen and making money is a win-win. Well, it can't. There are elements of win-win in it. If you run a decent company, you have loyal employees, you have loyal customers, you have a better quality product. These things can improve the bottom line. But there's more to it than that. And without any proof at all, I say, if you're going to run a radically decent business, 80 to 90% of the time, you're okay. The decisions, you can just go with your better instincts. But there's that 10 to 20% zone where, you got to just bite the bullet and say, you know what? If I'm going to be decent, I'm going to do this. And it may affect the bottom line. So I think we can do it in business. I think you can run a viable, radically decent business. You may not make quite as much, but you can make money, and you should. You're a business. I believe in capitalism.
Of course.
But you got to be tough-minded. It's no joke.
As we talk about business, there's so many people, like from my past, chirping in my ear about, again, this being Pollyanna. You're being this kind of overly liberal approach to it. And I will tell you this, for 5 years, I'd go to anywhere from 30 to 70 companies a year for anywhere from 1 to 3 days. And I'd get to work with their people. I mean, damn near, I'd say 100%. It's probably more around 90% of people were there and they realized the benefit it served them, but they wanted more from it. They were doing it to get to somewhere else. Yeah, I've heard so many times it's a means to an end, right? Oh. I mean, it was very disconcerting. And look, you might say, Chris, that's not the right number. Fine, it's 75. It's more than half. I don't care what you say. Especially when you're in these places where, look, I'm trying to make money. I'm trying to do things for my family. I want the finer things in life. Nobody's criticizing that. The reason I say that is, right, if that is the majority, all we're stating is, does it have to be that way? Can we build a system where, because I fundamentally believe people want to go to work and work, whatever that means, want to work on things that excite them and positively impact the world, right? So if you remove the current structure, I don't think people are just going to sit back on the couch and ask for handouts. I truly don't. Others will. We could debate that left and right. But to your point, if we realign the goals, the incentives to perhaps be more global, and it's happening now, right? A lot of companies are doing it. They're seeing it's the only way forward. Could we be more decent? I think it's a valid point.
I think it's possible. I don't see another way forward. I don't think politics is the answer. I don't think personal growth is the answer. I just think you get flattened by larger forces. The politicians are really at the behest of business, not vice versa. So what are we talking about here? I mean, it's important. It's very important. But if we're fundamentally going to change things, I think all the pointer signals point in the direction of business. And what I'm so excited about is that I absolutely believe that you can run a profitable, radically decent business where your social bottom line is as serious to you as your financial bottom line.
It's hard because I want to disagree for those out there. It's like one of the things I like to do is appease or answer those that are naysayers. I just believe in similar things. So I'm sure you've heard of like the B Corp, right?
Oh, yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
And I've seen that in action and I'm like, that's a step in the right direction. I mean, I dealt with it again when I was at this nonprofit. It was new to me. Oh, okay. And the ideal there is like, yeah, we put profit and call it people or call it benefit or whatever on the same plane. We don't misalign them. There's an interesting concept.
That's right. Yeah. You can have multiple but real bottom lines. Right. Although I do say you got to be clear. Maybe it's because we have to change the world. That profitability is priority 1A, and decency is priority 1. So profitability, when you have to make a choice, go with decency, trusting that 80 to 90% of the time, it's not a problem.
Right.
And that a path is going to reveal itself that will allow you to continue to be profitable. So I do have to say, my organizational manifestation these days is the Decency Foundation, which focuses on decency in business. And we've spoken at length with the B Corp guys who are actually right here in Philadelphia. And we're doing something that's complementary to what they're doing. they have this wonderful good housekeeping seal of approval, which is so important, and they're working with bigger companies. We want to create something that becomes less a scorecard and more a working metric to measure social return. So that instead of rating a company, we'll work with the senior executives and we'll say, we want to get us and you to a point where when you sit down with your senior executives each quarter, you'll say, let's review the financial returns and see how we've done and where we can improve. And now let's turn to our social metrics and let's see how we're doing there and what we've done well and what we haven't done well, what we can do in the next quarter to get better. And so we're working on this metric. I don't know if we can pull it off. It's really, really complicated, but I'm so excited about it.
Jeff, you know what's crazy is, I mean, our lives have kind of been extremely similar. I don't want to take too much time here, but the nonprofit I keep referring to is called Eat Real. And what we did was we took our model from LEED, right, from what they did for buildings, and we wanted to apply a similar standard to food service operators. So if you're a restaurant, how do we help increase health and sustainability? But we did it not through, here's a grade, get better. We said we went in and we would say with registered dietitians, with experts, we had a whole board and all of this full of some of the top doctors and health professionals. And we'd go in and say, here are some small changes you can do that will help both your bottom line and the world and the consumer. Could be as small as changing the oil. And they just didn't recognize it, right? And they do it, and it's healthier, it's more sustainable, it's cost effective. And like that's the smallest example. It has now shifted more towards a focus on education. I'm not there anymore. But my point is exactly what you're talking about, B Corp, LEED. And look, the world's going that way. The biggest companies are saying we're going, completely sustainable by 2050 or whatever it is.
I hope we're going that way.
Yes.
And we could be going that way.
That's true.
You can tell I'm a pretty heavy skeptic.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot for a long time. I got to tell you something, Chris. So our focus on creating this metric, we have a focus as well, and you're going to laugh. It's agriculture.
No way.
Yeah, because my partner in this project, an amazing man named John Mcconaughey, who you should put on your list of interviewees.
Yeah, really.
John left Wall Street 11 years ago, and he's a farmer in Princeton, and he's figured out two things. One is he's figured out how to make small farming profitable, which in essence is by bringing processing back to the farm,
Yep.
which is now affordable. It
Yep.
costs a tenth of what it cost 25, 30 years ago. And he's also working hard at being a socially responsible farm. So what we're doing is we're raising money at the Decency Foundation so that other farmers who could not finance a shift on farm processing because they didn't make a fortune on Wall Street, we're going to fund other farms to do exactly what John did. And then we're going to bring our metric to those farms, and we're going to help them become more and more socially responsible businesses. And then, just like you, my dream is that this model will extend beyond farming at a certain point.
That's amazing. So yes, let me get his name. Well, we can connect afterwards.
Exactly.
I'd love to. Man, we can talk about that. Okay, so I want to get back to this idea, the kind of bringing it back to what can we do and what does it mean? And I want to start here. A question I wanted to ask at the beginning: a values-based approach to a better life. Let's just pause there. Okay, what does a values-based approach mean? How do you define values? How can we define them for ourselves?
Okay, well, so I do it. I have 7 values, and I've said them a couple of times. So I won't repeat them again. And so the trick is to focus on those values literally at every moment. Okay? So when I started talking about John, I said, am I being decent to Chris because it's his show, and maybe I'm getting too... Okay, I think I'm thinking my values. It works for me. Does it work for Chris? Okay. So first of all, you need to articulate values clearly. And then the trick is to do it at each moment. Don't think like, well, this is something I'll do when I go to church on Sunday, or this is something I'll do, wherever, with my wife. And there's magic in that because it is subtle. And it does raise a lot of things about how we manage our own feelings, how we treat other people. And I do think you get better at it when you do it, day by day, moment by moment. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. No,
Okay.
for a lot of reasons, I want to dig in. So you're a psychotherapist. I'm wondering, do you ever talk to people or help them clarify their values?
It doesn't come up explicitly that often, but I like to think that it just permeates everything that I do with my clients. And the description of how I work with couples that I shared with you earlier, I think exemplifies that.
The reason I ask is going through coaching and things, I've worked with a lot of people, talked to a lot of people about, hey, define your values. I've heard and found many different ways to do that, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't. I think it's harder than we give credit for. So I was curious if I'm sitting listening to this going, you know what? I like this idea, but I haven't defined my values before. I'll tell you right now, if that's you, it's not as simple as like, what are my values? It's just not. But there are ways to figure it out. Do you have any kind of thoughts on that?
I started with this idea of radical decency with a bunch of people in my living room. And I said, so what do we mean by decency? And we wound up with 170 words, which I eventually whittled down to 5 and then expanded to 7. So I just want to really affirm when you say it's hard. I really believe that. And I think it requires a pretty tough reckoning because, we all want to have it both ways. God knows I still do,
Yep.
So I want to, I want to have the biggest piece of pie and make the most money and be decent, right? And, so it's really, really tough. And I guess all I can say is, like good therapy, it's day by day, and it's a war of attrition. It's just hard work and good work. I mean, obviously.
Absolutely. And so let's say that we have defined our values, and we're thinking about them at decision points. What do you propose, or what have you seen are some areas we can either get stuck or we can really exemplify this? What I'm trying to ask is, how do we operationalize this in our lives so we move it beyond the theoretical for every person listening?
Right. So, well, the thing that sustains me a lot is, nobody's radically decent. Okay. I'm not radically decent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's just too tough, right? Even if we lived in a very, values neutral world, which we don't. So I think that's really important, which is, this is a journey, and get away from compete and win. Don't judge yourself, okay? Because that's a horrible aspect of compete and win, is self-judgment, okay? So my mantra is focus, persistence, guts, creativity, and a lot of self-compassion. And it really does sustain me. I had a conversation with my wife this morning, and I have to think about the guts part. I could let this slide, but maybe I shouldn't. Now, the choice wasn't obvious, but the mantra was there. Don't forget about guts, Jeff. So,
do you think it's a cumulative reward, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's what I was just thinking of, right? Like, as you said that, I'm glad you walked through those, because we can talk about decency in general, and I get it, but again, operationalizing it for the individual, when we talk about our individual values and then how to implement them, it's a choice by choice basis. And I think without them, we can fall too easily to what serves me in this moment and what is perhaps easiest or least painful in this moment. And an argument or a discussion, a tough discussion with somebody you care about, is probably a prime example.
Or a lot of people fall into the other category, which is what pleases you in this moment.
Yeah. Okay. That's
You
fair.
know, I'm Mother Teresa here. You know,
yeah.
whatever you want is great. So,
Yeah.
and that's not great. That doesn't work.
Huh.
So, there's a Capper argument that to all of this for me, which I just believe so strongly, which is doing this is its own reward. Okay? And if it's okay, I'll run you through that.
Let's do it.
Okay. So, first of all, you're rarely focused on the present, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you focus on the present, all those regrets and anxieties about the past are going to tend to recede, right? I'm right here, right now, talking to Chris.
That's right.
Okay. Worries about the future tend to recede. So think about your business. If all you're thinking about is profit, it's going to be a very confusing, anxiety-filled future. But if it's informed by these overriding values, the future becomes simpler because my here and now choices are going to define the future. That's good. You feel better when you worry less about the past and or less regrets about the past, less worry about the future. The other thing is we're receding from judgment. Okay, and what goes in and what goes out. You're a coach. I'm sure you know this. They tend to converge. So if we're receding from judgment, we're treating ourselves better. We're not beating the crap out of ourselves because we finished second, or didn't get the contract. Okay. The other thing is it clarifies choices. Your choices are simpler, because you have a guidepost. And then the other thing is we all want to have meaning in life. And I think if you really embrace a values-based approach, it doesn't have to be radical decency. It could be Christianity or, Buddhism. But if you embrace it, you have an ennobling sense of purpose, and that's a big deal.
I'm pausing here because I know enough about this to be dangerous. I've done values exercises a long time, but it's so easy to stray from them. And I don't mean stray immensely. I'm not going out there doing things that are the antithesis of who I am or whatever. It just, it becomes difficult in the environment. I'm wondering what happens. Let's go back to business here as we wrap this up. What happens when my values are, whatever, empathy and mutual benefit and things like that. And I'm in a place where, at a job or at a conversation or a company where I know if I live my values, the outcome will be less optimal. How do you square that?
You can't. It's a dilemma, okay? And I spent a lot of time in the book talking about what do you do when you're a worker? What do you do when you're a middle manager? And, my advice is, well, you have to be self-protective. You have to be. If you don't survive, what's the point of the exercise? But if you're only self-protective, if you don't also really work on strategies to influence your immediate environment with your group and hopefully the larger environment, well, not enough. And understanding that these are authoritarian structures, every last one of them. And, And that's the final point I make in that extended discussion in the book, which is, your job's at stake. So take it seriously. Don't self-immolate. That's ridiculous, okay? But, people have died for their values. And there may come a point where you're just going to have to say to your company, I'm just not okay with it. And understanding the consequences.
Yep.
But don't look for those moments,
No, I think that is a great capstone here, because to your point, it is incremental, right? It is. This is one of the most incremental things we can do. I would ask if you believe the same, but this doesn't have to be an all or nothing. It can't be, because of the world in which we live and its complexities. But the more you take this approach, the more it becomes, first of all, the easier it becomes. So the more you probably do it without thinking, and therefore it transforms the person you are into the person you want to be, and therefore you are more proud of and look back on your life and your time accordingly. I mean, I think about, I was just listening to somebody talk about parenthood. I've got 2 little kids and how it makes you a better person. And, okay, that's a nice tagline on a bumper sticker, but then I thought about it and I really thought about it. Okay, how does it? And the first thing that jumped out to me is like my initial reactions to things I dislike are far more muted, right? If my son put a hole in the wall with a bat the other day on accident. He's 3, by the way. And I was just like, come on, man. like, I mean, they broke a window. Are you okay? That's the thing. So if you're somebody that leans towards maybe anger, that's a way of hopefully it making you better. My point with it all is it's continuously moving towards the person you want to become, but not doing it, to your point, at the extent that it's not going to let you move forward, therefore lose your job and things like that.
Right.
It's a great place to think about it.
And unless you can't avoid that.
Right.
But, for God's sake, martyrs are fine. They make their points, but I love that you said incremental. I mean, I think I'm a radical incrementalist.
We just changed the title there now.
Right.
Well, Jeff, this is awesome. It was everything I hoped for and more. I really appreciate it. We mentioned a few times the book, and I think this is one that's going to resonate with everyone. Radical Decency, a values-based approach to a better life and world. You talked about how for professionals, what do we do at these different turning points? How do we live this? Why does it matter? We've covered a lot of ground in this hour, but I think we've still just scratched the surface, and you go into more depth here. So I wanted to turn it over to you and a couple of things. One is there anything else you'd like to kind of leave the audience with as they think about radical decency? And then also, where would you guide them to find the book, to learn more about you, et cetera?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think I have much to add. I always like to end, and I have, with decency really is its own reward, and not in some airy-fairy way. Some really intensely practical day-by-day ways. And of course, I'd love people to read the book, and you can get it at Amazon. I also have, my author's page, www.jeffgarson.com, which has a little bit more and has my weekly blog on it. There's also a section where you can contact me, because as you can tell, I love to talk about radical decency.
Great.
So don't be the least bit shy to drop me a line through my website, and like I said, I love to talk about it.
That's fantastic.
So.
Well, again, Jeff, thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Chris, it's been great. I really, it's been great getting to know you.
You as well.
And I love how much we seem to share.
That was our interview with Jeff Garson. Hope you enjoyed it. Jeff's book, Radical Decency, a values-based approach to a better life and world, can be found wherever books are sold. And now let's get to a few housekeeping items, and then we'll get you on your way. If you'd ever like to reach out to the show, you can email us at smartpeoplepodcast@gmail.com or message us on Twitter @smartpeoplepod. And if you want to stay up to date with all things Smart People Podcast, head over to the website smartpeoplepodcast.com and sign up for the newsletter. Chris and I are able to keep making this podcast because of supporters like you. So if you want to support the show, head over to patreon.com/smartpeoplepodcast. All right, that's it for us this week. We've got a lot of great interviews coming up, so make sure you stay tuned, and we'll see you all next episode.